Welcome to DS Trucks. In today's video, we're doing brakes on this 20 F450, and what we're doing is preventative. We are actually going in and greasing the pins before they seize. Now, with the Ford OEM brake caliper pins, these basically allow the brake caliper to float in their sockets so that the pad can engage the rotor. So what happens is the grease on these pins from the factory are known to break down prematurely and cause the brake pads to wear, ruining the rotors, causing stress to the caliper, and a lot of times these will fail before the brake pads or rotors themselves, before they normally would have worn out. So what we're doing is going in and we're cleaning these up. We got to this truck before the grease was completely depleted, but what Ford uses from the factory is dielectric grease. It's a really nice dielectric grease, but the question is it up to the task of being used as a brake pin grease? Now, this truck, the pins were still sliding. Just maybe one was a little bit sticky. We're going to go ahead and replace this with a high temperature ceramic brake pin grease that's certified for rubber. And that's one of the things that you really have to watch out for when you purchase a grease for brake pads. So while we're in here, we're going to put new pads on here. This truck has 60,000. The pads are still in good shape, but for the work and labor of going in here to grease the pins, you're essentially gonna be removing the calipers anyway and needing to have the brake pads. I guess it's a little more work to actually pull out of the brake pads and replace the hardware and all that, but just to grease the pins, you do not need to change out the pads. You could just pull off the pins. You got to take the caliper off, and at that point, how much more work is it just to do the pads? But we're actually upgrading these pads to the Ford OEM blue brake pads. Check it out. These are the high performance brake pads, the blue ones that you get on ambulances. And I recommend, if you're going to upgrade, if you're in some heavy duty braking situations, just upgrade to the blue ones. But I recommend going to Ford for your brake pads instead of the parts store. When you go to Ford, you are a lot more likely to have a good fitting pad. These pads are fitting no problems. When you go to O'Reilly's and AutoZone, a lot of times with the brake pads, the ears are too thick because they use so much powder coat. So you have to end up sometimes grinding on brand new pads in order to get them to fit. So going forward, you get the OEM stuff, you get the OEM hardware, and a lot less chances of fitment problems. Not saying that these aftermarket pads are bad, but when you're having fitment issues, that's just not cool. So what we're doing, we're cleaning everything up. We are taking some compressed air in here, spraying a little brake clean in there into the pin. I've already done this. This is just for video purposes. And this is getting grease on my floor jack. And taking a little air. Also blowing out all the rust and grit everywhere. We went ahead and took a wire brush here and cleaned up the back ends where the hardware is going to go. If you don't do this, then it makes it so the new hardware might have a little rust behind it. Spray that with brake clean too, just to clean it up. Always wear safety glasses if you're working with brake clean, and then a little compressed air. cleaning everything up and getting ready for some new pads. I've already went ahead and cleaned these off with brake clean, compressed air, all that good stuff. So these are good as far as that's concerned. Basically, if you want to see how that goes, you just give it a quick brake clean, compressed air. Oops. Kind of hard to hold the compressed air with one hand. We're running a lot of PSI. So from there, I only got one glove, so I keep tearing these gloves up. But from here, we come in with our high temp silicone grease. Now this is the CRC high temp brake ceramic fortified grease. And I went through and literally searched every brake pan grease out there, and all of them seem to have issues with actually being compliant with the rubber. So this one says it meets Japanese rubber compatibility standards, JISK 2228, with EPDM and nitrate rubbers. That type of certification is actually a little bit hard to find on your brake greases. So on this particular product from CRC, this one is certified. Now, if I didn't have this grease, I would probably go back and use the Motorcraft, even though it's going to require a little more applications over time. The Motorcraft grease is going to be compatible with the rubber, although it is ultimately a dielectric grease. So thin coating like this, I could put more, but it scrapes off anyway, so there's only so much that you can put. You can also put a little bit here on the nose of this thing, because that's going to go right up into that boot or into that cavity. But if I load the side up too much, then it won't go into the cavity. It's just going to scrape off. So at this point, I can just spread this up, spread this flatter. The flatter the better, because like I said, it cleans off. It's a kind of a snug fit. We go ahead and we put this in. Like I say, like the bit on the start of it gets in there and it kind of scrapes off anyway, so you don't want to put a whole bunch on the sides of it. And you get a slight little push back from it, and there you go. Now we weren't getting that, obviously. This goes away even with the good stuff. After a little while, that little pushback will go away, but we weren't getting that at all. And it's not excessive either. You don't want it coming out and being a mess and being everywhere. Just enough. But anyway, that's enough of that. I'm just gonna do one on camera. You saw me clean it, you saw how. But anyway, on to the next scene. That's it, and that's that. The job is done. The customer is out of here. We had talked about a bunch of other stuff to do to the truck, but very interesting job. Basically just greasing the pins on the truck, and since we were in there, we did the pads. Now that can be a little bit controversial because we put new pads on old rotors. Now I think it's okay to do as long as you are doing this within reason. You know, if you have really grooved out rotors or really worn out freaking rotors, then it's not a good idea to put new pads on those rotors. Now, that being said, got a little phone call here. That being said, being that our rotors were new condition, very new condition, we went ahead and put the pads on there because we were in there anyway greasing the pins. With these brake systems on these Fords, a lot of times, HVAC's not on these brake systems on these Fords, a lot of times the
pins will just seize up and you don't know. But that being said, maybe the best course of action moving forward would be pull the passenger side front pin, passenger side front bottom pin first, and see where that pin is at. If the driver's side, if the passenger side front pin on the bottom is seized, then it's a good idea to grease the pins. If you don't have the funds, like if you're really watching the spending, then pull the passenger side, because that's the side that's in all the grit and water and grime and the curve of the road. That's going to be the first pin to go bad on you, will be the driver's side pin. Or do what we did. We went ahead, we cleaned the pins out real good, and we greased them. We greased everything really nice. And we went ahead and did that, and we know now that we're using a real high-end grease, high temperature, ceramic, rated, just like the best grease that I can get my hands on, the best brake grease that I can get my hands on, versus the Ford dielectric. Now, the Ford dielectric is okay if you're maintaining the system, if you're constantly greasing it, putting more grease into the system, then I think the dielectric is going to be fine from Ford. It has to be Ford's dielectric grease, not any dielectric, but Ford's dielectric grease. So I think that's going to be okay if you want to just use the factory product and do it every year. Or the CRC stuff, I'm wondering, we don't actually know how long. I mean, you probably have to do the CRC stuff every year or so too, depending on the usage. So for me, for my trucks, the plow rigs, every year. But for this type of vehicle, the one we did, his pins weren't even that bad yet. I mean, they were in need of some grease, but not too bad yet. So anyway, guys, comment below, tell me what you think. I know it's got a little controversial to put, new pads on old rotors, but it's just a matter of breaking them in for a few stops, and then they'll be broken in pretty good. And as long as it's in within reason, I think it's okay. But anyway, my name is Sean. This is DS Trucks. See you in the next video. Over and out.